website start Boron examples, and I just did the first one. At the third slide, there was this small example, and then I had an extra link, and I could click Run Example. So that's one of the things that needed to be in there for an integrated presentation system. Well, and then you have the choice: do you really want to make that completely dynamic, or do you want to cheat and pre-produce some of that content? I cheated because it's simpler to program. And I pre-produced the static web pages, but the Boron examples are being run in real time by starting Boron on the web server. So it's a mixed static dynamic system. Now, modeling the content of a page, it turns out to be very simple, really, because you need the body content. It's just text, but it needs to be multiple lines. But that's all included in a multi-line Boron string. And this is the way to assign a value to a symbol. And in this form, it's not called a word, but a set word. And unlike other languages, this colon is actually, in this form, it's really part of the word. The word is called text, but in this form, the colon is attached to it, and it's called a set word. And if you write a value behind it, it's going to set that word to that value. So you can very simply assign a multi-line string to a value, and then, well, that's the modeling, and then later you have to see what to do with the model. Now, we already know that we want Boron examples in it, and Boron examples are not strings, they're tokenized, they're lexical analyzed into words. That's the standard for Rebel dialects, and those are written in a block. So they're between square brackets. So we really have two forms of series here, character series and the value series in a block. So we only have two values, and then we already have the Boron dynamic example included in it. And this looks like program code to the human eye. It is program code, but as long as you assign it this way, it's not being evaluated. So if you put it in the database like this, it's just data. And you can manipulate it afterwards, and one of the things you can do with it is execute it, and then it becomes what other languages call program code. This example doesn't work. The database, well, it's just a list of the things that we just saw. So you do multiple of them. And then you have the problem that you want to, you must separate them as separate records. And the simple thing to do is to put the entire record in a block. So you just nest a block around it, and then you can have multiple blocks. And then you have a database of multiple records. And the interesting thing is that this database has a literal notation. You can write it as program code in a text file. So you can simply edit it like this in any text editor that you like, and put it in a file and call it point B or maybe .text. And it's text, but it's in Boron format. And you can load it very simply with the load command. The load command evaluates it but doesn't run it, so it must be Boron. Not normal text, but Boron, and that's exactly what this database is. I could have done it differently. You could have even left out the set words, test and example, but I did the database this way because in many cases you want to have records where some values are missing. So not all pages have an example. So in that case you only have a text, and then you need to give it a name to make it unambiguous. So that's why I did include the set words in the record format. And this probably won't work, but I'll try to run the example of loading the entire database. Somehow only the first example works, and then it does something weird. And to debug that. It's not really that big, so it should be ready, so it doesn't work. And then we need the template to make a record into a real web page. And this is slightly messed up. These characters are not supposed to be here. So again, this is a Boron data structure. So it's a block. And in a block are rebel values, and there are strings in it that you can use to denote the HTML tags. Rebel even has a data type for XML HTML tags. Boron doesn't have that, so in Boron you have to put them in strings, but in Rebel you can even leave out the string markers. And then if you take a block of Rebel values, and you know that it can be any value, and you start writing them as sort of a web page, then you can quickly see that what you really have very quickly is a template, because there are strings in there with the HTML tags. And this means a new line, and this means a tab, so they should have been encoded. So that's, I haven't found how to do that yet in Boron, so it's a bit messed up. In between the strings you can write Rebel words, and this is 2 words and this is an expression. And I've defined this as a function myself to HTML, and the text, that is the text that is supposed to come out of a record. We don't know yet how, but somehow we will have to match that. But we're modeling it now. We're now modeling the template. And when you have a plain text and you want to put it into an HTML page, you have to do some encoding. And that's also why this is messed up. The encoding isn't complete yet. So this is a very small function to do that encoding. And then here is a conditional expression. So hereby I can prove that Boron is Turing complete. This is also, most languages say if-else, but that doesn't fit very well with the block style of Rebel source code, which is very Lisp-like. So Rebel has either for if-else. There are 2 conditions depending on the test, and the test is example. And example may or may not be there. So we're using it, it's dynamically typed, so even though example will have a text in it, or it won't be there, we can also use it as a Boolean true-false condition for the either. And if there's no example, then we have the second block of the either. We'll just use an empty string. And if there is an example, then we have to encode that also. So we're doing 2 HTML on that too. And but the example is a Rebel block. So before we can do that, it needs to have the right type. So first we have to convert the block to a string, and then 2HTML knows how to encode a string to HTML format. And then you want to have a few extra HTML tags to create new lines. And because then you have multiple Rebel values, you have to put them in a block, and then to glue them together in one string, you can use rejoin. And that's actually an abbreviation for join reduce. And reduce is a Lisp-like term. It means that you have a Rebel block with data that could be code, and by reducing it you say, I want this data to be code, I want it to be evaluated as code, and I want all the pieces in it to evaluate to results. So you keep the entire list, but you evaluate it, so you get the example converted to HTML, and the strings with the extra tags, and you join them, and then that can be put into the HTML template, and then this is the result, because this is such a page with an example. And this example is taken from, no, it's actually written there in the record, we'll see that later, but here it's converted to string and then to HTML, and then joined into this HTML template, and this is what comes out of it. This is an incomplete template because the navigation system is